The air crackled with a silent, terrible anticipation that night. My wife, Chloe, was publicly tearing me to shreds at our anniversary dinner, but she had no idea that in just a few minutes, her entire world was going to spectacularly implode, and I was the one holding the detonator. This wasn't just a bad night, it was the culmination of months of calculated deception, leading to the most profoundly satisfying moment of my life. For weeks, Chloe had obsessed over this anniversary dinner party, a grand performance designed to impress her marketing firm colleagues and showcase our perfect for years of marriage. The scent of expensive catered food mixed with her cloying perfume, a heavy sweetness that felt almost suffocating. Our apartment, usually just home, was transformed into a glossy, pristine set piece, glowing under carefully placed mood lighting, looking like something ripped straight from a lifestyle magazine. I should have seen the warning signs. She'd actually insisted I take a personal day to help with the setup, a level of involvement she'd never once requested before. But I just thought, maybe, just maybe, she was finally trying. For about 10 blissful minutes, with the catered Italian food laid out and the lighting just right, I almost believed we might actually have a normal evening. Then the guests rolled in. Around 7:30, the apartment filled with exactly the crowd I'd expected, 5 couples from Chloe's office. People whose names I barely remembered, the kind who casually humble brag about their second homes and marathon times. Chloe, predictably, was on. From the moment the first person walked through the door, she was performing, that loud, theatrical laugh, touching everyone's arm as she spoke, throwing her head back like every mundane joke was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I just played my usual part, the invisible husband, keeping wine glasses full and the appetizer trays stocked. My presence, it felt, was purely decorative. About 90 minutes in, everyone had settled into the living room, the wine flowing freely. Someone made a glib joke about marriage killing your social life, and that's when I felt it, that distinct shift in energy, that telltale glint in Chloe's eye. It was a glassy, overexcited expression she'd get around her third glass of wine, when she craved absolute attention. I knew, with a sickening certainty, exactly where this was headed. One of the wives, probably trying to make polite conversation, asked us something generic about keeping the spark alive after 4 years. Chloe let out this sharp, dismissive laugh and drawled, "Oh, we definitely don't have that problem," her tone absolutely dripping with sarcasm. The whole room went awkwardly silent before people forced uncomfortable, nervous chuckles. But she wasn't done. She kept going. She launched into a barrage of cutting remarks about how I was extremely punctual in every area of life. How I approached intimacy like assembling IKEA furniture, complete with instruction manuals and perfectly ordered steps. How she was tempted to set a kitchen timer, just to see if I'd even notice. You could see everyone trying desperately to figure out if they should laugh or pretend they hadn't heard. The husbands suddenly became very interested in their drinks, examining the condensation on their glasses. The wives exchanged mortified glances. And I just sat there on the arm of the couch, sipping my beer, watching my wife systematically dismantle me in front of strangers. She escalated, describing me as so methodical, so obsessed with technique, that I completely missed the entire point. She said being intimate with me was like watching someone follow a YouTube tutorial. I saw guests subtly checking their phones, looking for exit strategies. One guy bravely tried to redirect, asking about our vacation plans, but Chloe just bulldozed right over him. "Oh, he's fantastic at planning," she sneered. "Plans every single detail." That's actually the problem. There's zero spontaneity, zero passion, just task after task after task. At that point, the hurt had completely dissipated. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was strangely fascinated, watching this train wreck unfold in slow motion. The absolute climax came when she turned, fixed her gaze directly on me, and a cruel little smile played on her lips. The really sad part is, she spat, he legitimately thinks he's good at it. Like he genuinely believes he's doing everything right. But honestly, it's just pathetic. The entire apartment went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. I didn't react. Didn't defend myself. Didn't say a single word. I just took a slow, deliberate sip of my beer and waited. Because I knew exactly what was coming next. That's when Paige, Chloe's supposed best friend, who'd been sitting directly across from us the whole night, spoke up. Her voice cut through the silence like a knife. I'd noticed her watching me all evening with this strange, unreadable expression. Now I understood. She looked at Chloe, then at me, then back at Chloe, and said, very clearly, very deliberately, "That's interesting, Chloe, because he's actually incredible. Honestly, one of the most attentive partners I've ever experienced." I swear, the shock in the room was almost physical. Chloe's face went through about 5 stages of grief in 3 seconds, from smug satisfaction to confused bewilderment, then dawning comprehension, and finally, a ghastly, absolute white shock. Her mouth literally hung open. Every single person in that living room was completely frozen, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. I watched Chloe's brain completely malfunction in real time. Watched her trying to figure out if this was some kind of twisted joke. Watched the exact microsecond she realized it absolutely was not. And I just sat there, calm as Sunday morning, because this was precisely the moment I'd been waiting 6 months for. The room erupted into total chaos. People jumped to their feet. Someone's wife frantically grabbed her purse. A couple of the guys tried to act like they'd suddenly gone deaf. And Chloe just kept repeating, "What? What? What?" over and over, like a scratched record, while Paige sat there with a small, satisfied smile. I finally stood up. I set my beer down on the coffee table with complete composure, looked around at all these shocked faces, and said, very calmly, before anyone leaves and jumps to conclusions, "I think you all deserve to understand exactly how we arrived at this moment. Because this story actually started 6 months ago, and it's considerably more complicated than what you just heard. The truth is, I'd known about Chloe's affair for 6 months before that dinner party. And every single day, I played the role of the oblivious, clueless husband while I systematically built a case that would completely dismantle her life. It started on an unremarkable afternoon when I noticed a text notification pop up on her phone from someone named Derek. Understand, I'm not the type of guy who goes through his wife's phone. But this particular message appeared on her lock screen, while her phone was sitting on the couch between us. It said, "Still thinking about this morning. Can't wait to have you again," followed by 3 fire emojis. My stomach just dropped. Chloe was in the bathroom, and I had maybe 20 seconds. I grabbed her phone, punched in the passcode I'd watched her enter 1,000 times, and opened that message thread. What I discovered in those 20 seconds, before I heard the toilet flush, made me want to vomit. 6 solid months of messages. Literally hundreds of them. Explicit photographs. Hotel names and room numbers. Specific times and dates. All laid out like evidence for a trial. They'd been meeting up at least twice a week. Sometimes during lunch breaks, sometimes after work when she claimed she was at spin class or having drinks with the girls. And the messages weren't just about the physical aspect, they were so much worse. She called me boring, said I was like a robot in bed, joked about how I never even realized when she was faking, which was apparently every single time. Made fun of the way I organized the pantry and folded towels. Said I was useful for stability, but completely unexciting. Derek kept asking, "When are you finally going to leave this guy?" And she'd respond, "Soon, just waiting for the right moment." And they'd laugh about how completely oblivious I was, how easy it was to lie directly to my face. Then I found the message that changed everything, where she explicitly wrote, "He's getting that senior manager promotion next month. Once that goes through and I can figure out the financial situation, I'm out." And suddenly I understood. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated, long-term plan to extract maximum value from me before discarding me. I heard the bathroom door handle turn. I closed those messages, placed her phone back exactly where it had been. And when Chloe walked back in, I was casually scrolling through sports scores on my own phone like nothing happened. She picked up her phone without even glancing at me and went right back to texting, probably him. And I just sat there, feeling like someone had scooped out my insides. That night, I didn't sleep 1 minute. Just lay there beside her, replaying every moment of the past year in my head. Every excuse. Every late evening. Every time she'd rolled away from me, claiming exhaustion. And suddenly, every single piece fit together perfectly. The weird part is, I didn't cry. Didn't have a breakdown. Didn't confront her. I immediately started planning. Because that message about my promotion had triggered something cold and utterly ruthless in my brain. I realized if I played this correctly, I could completely reverse the power dynamic. The next morning, I called in sick. I spent 9 hours doing research. Found a divorce attorney with excellent reviews. Had a phone consultation. And learned some very interesting facts about my legal position. The apartment we lived in, the one Chloe loved showing off, was solely mine, purchased 2 years before we even met with inheritance money from my grandfather. Both vehicles were titled in my name because she'd had terrible credit when we got married, and I'd helped her rebuild by putting everything through my accounts. We maintained one joint checking account for shared household expenses, but all our other financial accounts were completely separate. And she earned roughly $35,000 less than me annually. The lawyer essentially told me I was in the strongest possible position for divorce. That she'd have zero claim to the apartment. That I'd likely keep everything. And that documented evidence of infidelity would only strengthen my case. I started building my file immediately, taking screenshots of every message whenever I could discreetly access her phone, backing everything up to a secure cloud account she didn't know existed, maintaining a detailed log of every suspicious absence. I opened a new checking account at a different bank and gradually redirected my direct deposits there, leaving just enough in our joint account to cover bills so she wouldn't notice. I pulled every important document from our filing cabinet: birth certificate, passport, insurance paperwork, investment statements, and secured it all in a safe deposit box across town. I went to my boss and told him I needed to postpone that promotion everyone had been planning for me due to personal circumstances. It confused him, but he accepted it. And that single decision completely derailed Chloe's entire timeline. Then, about 3 weeks before the anniversary dinner, I received an unexpected message from Paige, Chloe's supposed best friend, asking if we could meet privately for coffee. My first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was some kind of trap. But something about the message felt genuinely urgent. So, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop on the opposite side of town, where nobody from Chloe's office would see us. Paige showed up looking genuinely nervous. Ordered a latte she never touched, and then just unloaded everything. She told me she'd known about the affair for at least 2 months. That literally everyone at their office knew. That people were actively laughing about it behind Chloe's back because Derek was married, and his wife actually worked in the same building, 3 floors up. She told me Chloe had already consulted her own divorce lawyer, that she was planning to file immediately after my promotion came through, and that she'd been coaching Derek on his strategy to leave his wife at the same time. But here's where it got really interesting. Paige wasn't telling me this out of friendship or loyalty. She was telling me because she was absolutely furious that Chloe had been using her as an alibi for months, lying to her face. And because, apparently, Paige had developed serious feelings for Derek herself and was enraged that he'd chosen Chloe instead. Then Paige dropped the real bomb. She told me that months ago, when Chloe was out of town, she and Derek had gotten together at a company happy hour and ended up back at her place. So, she had first-hand knowledge that could seriously damage Chloe's ego and relationship. Paige looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I want to help you completely destroy her. And I know exactly how to make it happen." And that's when we constructed our plan for the anniversary dinner. Her strategy was brilliantly brutal. At the right moment during the party, when Chloe was drunk and started tearing me down, like Paige knew she would, Paige would make an ambiguous claim about us that would sound like a confession of an affair. Whether anything had actually happened between us didn't matter. The accusation alone, combined with the way she'd phrase it, would detonate everything. And Chloe's guilty reaction would expose her own affair with Derek, even if my supposed involvement with Paige was completely fabricated. It was psychological warfare at its finest. I went home that afternoon, had my lawyer finalize all the divorce paperwork, got everything ready to file, and then I simply waited. I watched Chloe excitedly plan that party. Watched her texting Derek about how it would be hilarious to roast me in front of her colleagues. Watched her pick out the perfect outfit to wear while she humiliated her husband. And I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt nothing except ice-cold determination and the quiet confidence that comes from holding all the cards while your opponent thinks they're winning. So, we're back in that living room. 10 shocked people staring at me like I'd just announced I was actually an alien. Chloe's face completely drained of blood. And Paige, sitting there with that victorious little smirk. I let the silence hang heavy for a long moment, let everyone fully process what I just said about this story starting 6 months ago. And then I calmly pulled out my phone and opened the cloud storage folder I'd been meticulously building. Chloe immediately understood what was happening. She literally jumped up from the couch and screamed, "Don't you dare." But it was far too late for that. I was completely done protecting her carefully constructed image. I started reading the text messages out loud. Not all of them, because we'd be there until sunrise, but the absolute greatest hits. The ones where she called me pathetic and boring. Where she laughed about faking every single intimate moment we'd shared in 4 years. Where she and Derek planned out their beautiful future together after they both dumped their respective spouses. Where she specifically stated she was waiting for my promotion to go through before filing, so she could maximize the divorce settlement. And I watched every single person in that room physically recoil. One of the wives audibly gasped and grabbed her husband's arm. Another couple just stood up and walked straight toward the exit without saying a word. And the men all had this look of absolute horror because they were suddenly realizing they'd spent the past 90 minutes laughing at jokes about a man whose wife was actively plotting his destruction. Chloe kept desperately trying to interrupt, saying, "That's not what it looks like. You're taking everything out of context." But I just kept reading. Kept systematically showing everyone exactly who she really was. And with each message I read out loud, I watched her carefully built social circle disintegrate in real time. Then I got to my favorite part. I pulled up the message thread between Chloe and Paige. The ones where Chloe complained about having to constantly use Paige as her alibi. Where she called Paige kind of desperate and pathetic and said she only maintained the friendship because Paige was incredibly useful for cover stories. And the expression on Paige's face when she realized I was exposing her role too was absolutely magnificent. Paige immediately tried to backtrack, started saying, "Wait, hold on. I was trying to help you." But I just looked directly at her and said, "You weren't trying to help me, Paige. You were trying to hurt Chloe because you wanted Derek for yourself, and you're just as manipulative as she is. You just hide it better." And that's when the last remaining guests literally fled for the door. Within about 90 seconds, that living room went from 10 people to just 3, me, Chloe, and Paige. And the silence was absolutely deafening, except for Chloe's hyperventilating and Paige's angry breathing. Chloe completely collapsed onto the couch and started crying. Not genuine sad crying, but that calculated, manipulative crying she does when she needs sympathy. And she kept repeating, "It was a mistake, just a stupid mistake. We can fix this," over and over like a broken recording. I walked very calmly over to where my jacket was hanging by the front door, reached into the inside pocket, pulled out a manila envelope, and dropped it onto the coffee table directly in front of her. She stared at that envelope like it was a venomous snake. Wouldn't touch it, just kept staring. And I said, in the calmest voice I could manage, "Those are divorce papers. I'm filing first thing tomorrow morning at the courthouse. And just so we're completely clear, you're getting absolutely nothing." And then I explained to her in detail exactly what my attorney had told me. The apartment was mine from before we ever met, purchased with inheritance money. Both cars were titled solely in my name. Our finances were mostly separate, except for one household account. I had 6 full months of meticulously documented infidelity, complete with timestamps and hotel locations. And I'd already quietly moved the majority of my money into accounts she couldn't access. I told her she had until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live, because this was my property, and I wanted her completely out. And the look of utter devastation on her face when she finally understood she'd been outplayed at her own game was almost worth 6 months of torture. She immediately tried the apologetic routine, actually got down on her knees, grabbed both my hands, and said, "I love you. I made a terrible mistake. Please don't do this to us." But it was so transparently hollow and performative that it was almost funny. I pulled my hands away and told her the complete truth, without any anger or emotion, just facts. I said, "You don't love me, Chloe. You never actually loved me as a person. You loved what I provided. You loved the financial stability and this apartment and the comfortable life, but you never loved who I actually am. And honestly, I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just genuinely relieved this is finally over." And something in her just snapped. She went from begging to absolute rage in half a second. She started screaming about how I'd regret this decision, how she'd make my life hell, how I was going to die alone and miserable. And Paige was just standing there, incredibly awkwardly, trying to figure out whether she should leave or stay. I told Paige she needed to leave immediately. She tried one final manipulation tactic, walked up close to me, and said, "You know, we could actually be really good together." I wasn't lying about what I said earlier. And I actually laughed right in her face. I told her I would genuinely rather be alone for the rest of my life than get involved with someone equally as manipulative as my soon-to-be ex-wife, just with a different strategy. And she absolutely lost it and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough that a framed picture fell off the wall and shattered. That night, I slept in the guest room with the door locked while Chloe cried in our former bedroom. And first thing the next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer's office and officially filed everything. Over the following 2 weeks, everything fell apart for Chloe in the most spectacularly beautiful way possible. The screenshots I displayed at the party had been secretly recorded on at least 3 different phones and somehow circulated through her entire office within 48 hours. Paige had vindicatively sent comprehensive evidence of the affair directly to their HR department, and both Chloe and Derek were terminated for violating the company's explicit workplace relationship policy. Derek's wife obviously found out through the office gossip network, immediately filed for divorce, and apparently created this incredibly detailed social media post about the entire affair that went viral in their friends' circles and absolutely destroyed both their reputations. Chloe tried desperately to stay with various friends, but apparently nobody wanted to house someone who'd been publicly exposed as a serial liar and calculated cheater, and she eventually had no choice but to move back in with her parents, who lived 3 states away. The absolute perfect cherry on top happened approximately 3 months after that anniversary dinner party. I was home alone for the first time in months, finally feeling genuine peace in my own space, just heating up some leftover pizza and watching the playoffs, when my doorbell rang at almost 9:30 at night. I looked through the peephole, and there stood both Chloe and Paige in my hallway, and I could literally hear them arguing before I even opened the door. I cracked the door open about 4 inches, with the security chain still in place, and asked what they wanted. They both immediately started talking over each other. Chloe claiming she needed to pick up some belongings she'd left behind. Paige saying she needed to talk to me urgently about something important. And then, right there, they turned on each other. Right there in my apartment hallway, they started absolutely screaming about whose fault this entire disaster was. Paige calling Chloe a manipulative user who deserved everything she got. Chloe screaming that Paige was pathetic and obsessed and had ruined everything. And it literally escalated into them physically pushing each other. I told them both very clearly that I was calling the police immediately if they didn't leave in the next 30 seconds. Stepped back inside my apartment and firmly locked the door while they continued their dramatic screaming match in the public hallway. I could hear them yelling at each other all the way down to the elevator. Heard the doors finally close, and then blessed silence. I walked back to my reheated pizza, sat down on my couch in my apartment that was finally just mine, and started genuinely laughing. Because the entire situation was so absurdly, perfectly karmic. It felt like fiction. The woman who'd spent years systematically making me feel small and inadequate and worthless had lost her job, her entire friend group, her home, and every shred of dignity. All because she couldn't resist the urge to publicly humiliate me one final time in front of an audience. The divorce went through without any contest whatsoever because she had absolutely no legal or moral leg to stand on. Her lawyer apparently advised her to just sign everything and move on. These days, I'm genuinely doing better than I have in years. I started seeing a therapist to work through all the manipulation I'd endured. I accepted that promotion I'd strategically postponed. And I'm actually seeing someone new I met at an industry conference who treats me like an actual human being with value instead of a utility to exploit. Sometimes late at night, I think about that anniversary dinner and how differently everything could have gone if I'd just confronted Chloe privately. But honestly, I don't regret the public exposure even slightly. Because she made the calculated choice to humiliate me in front of an audience for her own entertainment, and karma simply returned that favor with compound interest. What do you think about the story? Was I completely justified, or did I take it too far? Drop your thoughts below. I'm reading everything.